Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Schmierer from Sparx Services North America, and we're going to kick off our last session of this year's EA Global Summit. This session here, we're going to be talking about the unique procurement and deployment challenges that are faced when deploying Sparx in federal agencies. A couple of housekeeping notes before I get started on this. I will leave some time for question and answer at the end of this session. If you could go ahead and enter your questions into the GoToPlatform questions box at the top right corner of your screen, that would be great. Otherwise, you can put them in the Slack channel for the summit, and I will address them afterwards. If you're watching this video on YouTube following the event or a recording, feel free to reach out at sales@sparxsystems.us or the GovSales alias that I will provide, that email box at the end of the presentation, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Before we get started, a little bit about me. Like I said, my name is Ryan Schmierer. I'm actually head of operations here at Sparx North America. And at Sparx Services North America, we're focused on helping organizations implement the tools that they need to be successful in their architecture practices. So the things that we're going to be covering today are all questions that our sales team receives when working with government agencies, questions about the procurement process, questions about security and compliance and EULAs. There's a whole bunch of unique things as it relates to deploying Sparx in the government, and we're going to try and answer a lot of those questions here today. But like I said, if I've missed anything, please let me know by putting it in the Q&A thing. I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off so you guys can see the slides full screen. Okay, here's the topics we'll be covering. You can read it. We're going to go through these things one by one. The first thing that you need to consider when you're doing a Sparx deployment in any organization, but particularly in the government, is making sure that you scope the effort correctly and making sure that you understand who's going to be involved in the project from the start. The questions specifically that you need to answer are, what features do we need? Am I just looking for a tool for modelers to use, or am I concerned with collaboration with stakeholders? Do I need Collaborate in there? Do I need integrations? Where's my data coming from? How's it going to be consumed? You also need to think about the environment that's going to be operating in. Is this something that you're going to be having certain types of architecture modeling going on? The way you deploy the platform and the features that you need may be different if you're doing systems engineering for a DoD group versus you're doing business architecture or APM in one of the other federal agencies. The next question is, where will the platform be hosted? We're going to talk about this a little bit more, but you're deploying a platform. It's not just software deployed on people's desktops. You need to think real hard about where you're going to deploy that platform. And then the third question, who's going to manage it? So one of the biggest mistakes we see is federal agencies underestimate the effort required to deploy and operate an architectural platform. So you need to think about who has the skill sets and experience needed to manage your platform for you. And then what does the solution architecture look like? Is this a single instance environment where you've got one prod instance and that's it? Is this a DoD deployment where you've got this on an unclassified network and a classified network? You may need twins. Do you need a dev test prod environment? These are things that you need to think about up front before you start your implementation project. For those of you who have worked with us in the past, I bring up this picture a lot. I use this in the commercial space, but it is a healthy and helpful reference model as we talk about government deployments. When you look at this, any architecture platform, you need to address these 5 areas, okay? And whether you're choosing Sparx, whether you're choosing another platform, you need to have a plan and you need to understand your costs and your strategy as it relates to all 5 of these areas. The first one is the license costs. Okay, what licenses do you need for the features that you require and the type of deployment you're trying to do? We're going to talk a little bit about some unique things about procuring licenses here in a moment. The second piece is infrastructure and hosting. Where's it going to run? Who's going to operate it? Do the people who are tasked with operating it, do they know how to deploy a Sparx platform? We've seen, it's actually a somewhat complex process to deploy Sparx in a federal environment where you've got a whole bunch of regulations, security controls, and that sort of thing that need to be put in place. You can do this yourself. You can hire somebody else to do it, but you need to make sure that somebody understands how to deploy the Sparx platform effectively. The third piece is platform configuration. Great, the IT teams have deployed the platform, it's there. Everyone who's used Sparx understands that it is the most versatile architecture platform available today. However, it needs to be configured to be useful. So you need to have the discussions about what type of modeling are we doing? What does our role-based access control scheme look like? How will our repository be structured? What is our meta model? What do our security protocols look like? What do our governance processes look like? These configuration issues typically fall within the team that's going to be doing the modeling, not necessarily the IT team tasked with administering the platform. But whether you have the knowledge and experience in-house to configure this, or you bring in a contractor to help you, you need to make sure you have a plan for how you're going to configure the platform. Fourth area is user training. Great, you've got the platform configured. Do your people know how to use it? And are they going to be positioned to use it consistently to develop a complete architecture for the things that you need modeled out? User training, you may have in-house experts who can do the training. You may need to call somebody in to help, but you need to make sure that your users understand how to use the platform. And then the last piece is support and maintenance. Great, you've got this platform that you're putting all this data into. This goes along with the hosting and administration piece. You need to make sure that you've got the right support behind the scenes to manage the platform both day to day and the support tickets and user onboarding, but also make sure that you've got the right resources and supporting contracts in place to address things like disaster recovery, security incidents, patching and upgrades, and making sure that your platform stays up to date with Sparx best practices. So of these 5 areas, you need to have a plan for all of these. You can do most of these yourself. You can hire people to do them. If all you do is buy a Sparx license, all you're purchasing is the opportunity to fail. If you want to succeed in your architecture endeavor, you need to make sure you have a plan for all 5 of these areas before you get started. If you don't have a plan and you don't know how you're going to address these things, don't start. Okay, jumping forward to deployment options. When you're deploying a Sparx platform in the federal space, you really have 4 options, viable options that are out there. The first one is an on-prem deployment in a data center that someone within your agency administers. This is the way it's been done for small team deployments for years. And up until a couple of years ago, this was really kind of your only option for deploying Sparx. You now have some other options available. The second is a cloud deployment that you administer yourself. You can deploy Sparx in an AWS or Azure cloud environment that is your instance that your team manages, and you self-administer it. If you don't have the resources to deploy and administer it yourself, you can move to the third option, which is hiring a contractor, someone to help you with the deployment, implementation, and administration of the platform. And if you're looking for teams who have experience in doing this, you need to make sure that they have direct experience with deploying Sparx platforms. This isn't just a general IT job that a systems administrator or someone with AWS sysadmin experience can do effectively. They need to understand how to administer a Sparx platform. The fourth option, which emerged really within the last year, is there are a couple of third-party cloud deployments options available. Specifically, there's one offered on the Cloud One platform by SAIC that was developed for the Air Force. There's also one managed by Sable Systems. These are pre-deployed Sparx environments that you can work with them, and there's processes for onboarding where you can actually use them as a service provider on it. They've already got FedRAMP. They've already got this, set up in secure environments if that's needed. These were designed for the military, but both of these organizations are open to providing Sparx platforms to other government agencies as well. So you now have that available if you don't want to deploy it yourself. One thing to note on here is you probably hear about Sparx hosted platform offerings, EA SaaS, things like that. these offerings are not designed for federal agencies. And because of the operating model behind it in terms of who's administering and supporting them, it involves some folks on global teams that those operations are not FedRAMP compliant. And so, we do not recommend and we do not support onboarding federal agencies onto the Sparx SaaS offerings. There are other opportunities and other options to help you along the way. If you decide to go with any of the self-administered options or self-hosted options, what we have instead is a set of assisted deployment services and support services to help your in-house teams be successful managing your Sparx deployment. We're more than happy to talk to you about those, but in the federal space, it needs to be a government-controlled environment. Okay, a couple of common compliance questions, and I'm specifically going to address FedRAMP and 508 compliance here. We see these on almost every RFP and tool assessment questionnaire we see come through, and there's a lot of misconceptions here about what's actually necessary. So the first question we get often is Sparx software FedRAMP compliant? Well, that's actually not a valid question because the software wouldn't be FedRAMP compliant. FedRAMP is a set of standards and policies that apply to how a platform is operated and the operations that are running the platform, where it's deployed, how it's deployed, and who's managing that deployment. Because Sparx does not offer a SaaS platform to the federal government, the whole FedRAMP discussion becomes one of the questions on the previous slide around the deployment option that you're choosing. If you choose to self-host or have a contractor manage this for you, it's that implementation that needs to comply with the FedRAMP controls, not the software. So it isn't a software question, it's a deployment question. And it's something that there's often a lot of misconceptions about the role of FedRAMP in a Sparx deployment. The second one is our EA and Collaborate 508 compliant. For those of you who aren't familiar with the 508 regs, this is all about accessibility. And that if software is provided to federal agencies and for federal employees to use, it needs to be accessible to those employees that have disabilities as well. So, over the last couple of years, Sparx has invested a tremendous amount of time and effort in making sure that the software is accessible. And it wasn't just because of 508 compliance. The vision of Sparx Systems is to make this software as accessible and usable to as many people as they possibly can. So they really internalize this notion of accessibility and making the software work for people wherever they're coming from, with different languages, screen readers, you name it. So yes, Sparx software is 508 compliant. There is I think it's VAPT. I may have the wrong acronym there, but there is a report on that is the standard thing that gets asked for. And as a part of the product roadmap, they're continuously adding new accessibility updates and features as well. There is an ask coming from the product team as it relates to accessibility. We need more feedback from our user community about what changes are needed and what the pain points are when it comes to accessibility. So if you have folks within your organization who are trying to use Sparx and saying, yeah, I struggle with it here or here, we really want that feedback so we can feed that back into the product development cycle. Other compliance related stuff. As Patrick talked about on the last session, there's so many federal requirements and government requirements, it is almost impossible for anyone to understand everything they have to comply with. Everyone, whether it's the federal agencies or any tool vendor, we're doing the best we can to try and stay compliant with everything that's out there. And it's a moving target. So if you see something that your agency has a set of regulations that say we have to be compliant with this set of things, share it with us. We're only able to address the things that we know about, and there's very likely things that we're unaware of yet. So we request your help in letting us know additional steps that we need to take in order to make the product more usable. Okay, license procurement and EULA considerations. This is an area that has become a hot button issue in the federal space over the last year in particular. And I'm going to jump to the bottom half of the slide to start with to explain the problem statement. Government purchasing regulations require that any software used by U.S. government agencies have EULAs and license agreements that are compliant with federal purchasing rules and laws. The Sparx commercial EULA does not comply with some of those regulations. However, there is an alternate government compliant EULA that's available and is required for all licenses in use by federal agencies. Okay, there's a lot of legacy licenses that are out there, government agencies that purchase commercial licenses. We're actively working with organizations to get those converted over to the correct EULA, so the agencies are in compliance with the regulations that are out there. A couple of things to note on this. GSA has started cracking down on this, and some agencies have started to get into a little bit of trouble for having software that is not compliant with the regs. And none of us want that, so we want to make sure that we help you get into compliance as quickly as we can. However, it's your responsibility, either as a government agency or a reseller or a partner who is procuring licenses or renewing licenses on behalf of the U.S. government, to specify in your quote request that you need licenses with the U.S. government compliant EULA. You know, the end responsibility and accountability lies with the end users of the tools and the people who are procuring them. We're here to help you stay in compliance, but the responsibility is yours to make sure that you're not buying through other channels. There are 3 procurement channels that you have available to you when it comes to procuring government compliant licenses. You can buy them direct through Sparx Services North America, and the email address is there if you want to reach out to them. There are a set of U.S. government resellers. You see the SOUP or SEWP resellers. The Army has CHESS resellers. These are programs, software resale programs that the government has entered into agreements with different software resale houses to aggregate software licenses from different vendors. And this provides a resale channel where you can get competitive quotes if you need to on these things. But these resellers are aware of the EULA requirements, and they know how to procure them in the way that you need. So you can buy it direct, you can buy it through the government resale programs. There's also a GSA contract that has Sparx licenses on it, and the number is listed there. So you can buy it through GSA eBuy and all of the various GSA procurement programs. But it's important that you make sure that you're getting the right licenses if it's a government deployment. Okay, so when it comes to deploying in secure environments, let me address some stuff that needs to get taken care of in the licensing side of things, and then other considerations that are unique as it relates to deploying the software. The first issue is around licensing. So I talked about early on about planning for your deployment and the need to figure out your solution architecture and how many environments and what types of environments you need to work with. Yes, Sparx can be deployed in an air-gapped environment or in a secure network that has no connectivity to the internet. But if you're going to do that, you need to make sure you have the right licenses to support that. And specifically what we're addressing here is if you've got more than one deployment, either you've got a secure, unsecure network type deployment, or you have a dev environment and a production environment, you need to make sure that the Sparx licenses you buy are the right licenses to support the multi-instance deployment. Enterprise Architect floating and fixed licenses can be used in environment twins. So if you read the EULA for Sparx, even your fixed licenses, it was originally written so you could use it at work and then also have a second instance that you use at home. if someone had a personal laptop type thing that they needed to use the license. But in the federal space, this allows you to use the same licenses as long as it's the same user base in the dev environment and a prod environment or a secure environment and a non-secure network. So you can reuse that stuff. And feel free to reach out to us. I'm happy to explain to you the mechanics on how to do that. ProCloud Server. The big difference licensing-wise for ProCloud Server, Team Server supports a single instance deployment. Enterprise Edition, you have the opportunity to have a test environment license or a failover license agreement that basically gives you a second license for ProCloud Server that can be deployed in the second environment. We've seen some issues recently where government agencies have said, hey, we've just got one instance, and then they go to deploy it and they're like, oh, shoot, we've got to have a second instance over here. And they end up having to go back and procure some more licenses. It's a lot cheaper for your organization if you just buy the Enterprise Edition. It's a couple $1,000s more in costs, but it'll give you the licenses you need to deploy in multiple environments, as long as there's only one production instance at a time. Collaborate, similar type situation. You need to make sure if you've got multiple instances that you buy at least the large Teams edition, so 100 users or greater, and that gives you a test license to go along with it. So you have the ability to deploy in the multiple environments you're talking about. So some deployment considerations, once you've got your licenses and you're going to deploy, some things that you need to be dealing with are deployment architecture, in terms of how many environments you have, how you're going to use them. If you're in a secure network and an unsecure network, is your unsecure network an additional production instance or used for different things? Or is it just a test instance and your real prod is in your secure network? You need to understand that. And there are some things that you need to figure out in terms of how are you going to promote things between the environments. Software scanning. Very often in government agencies, individual agencies have specific requirements for scanning of software and where those scans take place. You need to take those into consideration and make sure if you have to do that sort of thing, that you've got an appropriate environment for doing it. If you've got an instance where you have a secure network, that is classified and that sort of thing, and you're deploying Sparx in that, which you can do, it's a very common thing in the DoD space. One of the key challenges we have is patching and upgrades. What is the migration path for getting the updated files into the secure network where they need to be, because those are initially downloaded from the Sparx registered user sites on the internet. You need to make sure you have a plan for how you're going to handle the updates and patching for the system. Authentication and access control is the next piece. And this applies regardless of what sort of deployment architecture you're talking about. Government agencies have some pretty strict controls around using your organization accounts and potentially physical smart cards for authentication. You need to make sure your Sparx platform is configured correctly to be able to work using those authentication methods, and we can help you with that. And we're actually going to talk about that a little bit more in just a couple slides. And then the last issue you're going to have to consider is how are you going to support this platform? Keeping in mind the fact that Sparx deployments do require people who are knowledgeable with how to administer Sparx platforms. You need to consider whether the people you have hired either internally or contracted with to provide support, either tier 1 or tier 2 support, that they have the right clearances to be able to work on the platform in the environment where you've deployed it. We've seen some issues where people have deployed within a classified network, and if they ran into a technical issue, they had some severe limitations to who could troubleshoot the platform. And in many cases, it became a little bit of a scramble to figure out, okay, how can we build a support model that matches with our deployment architecture? So you need to think about platform support and operations up front. And that's something we can certainly help you with. Okay, I talked a minute ago about authentication. Very common in most government deployments now is to require either a CAC card or a PIV card in order to authenticate to the platform. And people ask the question, does Sparx support that? Yes, but you have to configure the platform in a certain way to make that happen. If you have a requirement to use physical smart cards for authentication, you need to make sure you have clearly defined role-based access control structure, with your groups and permissions defined up front. You need to configure your Active Directory groups correctly and make sure that the right people are assigned to the right groups. Within your EA repository, you need to configure it for Windows authentication, not OIDC authentication, but Windows authentication. And then you need to make sure that your Active Directory groups are assigned correctly in your security group configuration. So this is all part of a typical role-based access control discussion, but this is a place where government deployments often are very different than commercial deployments. In commercial deployments, you're talking about single sign-on and using an identity provider system. In government deployment, we use Windows authentication in order to enforce the smart card requirements. And then within Collaborate, you need to configure that for AD authentication and not use SAML. So in here, this is a part of your platform deployment. Yes, it can be done, but it needs to be configured correctly in order for the security protocols to work correctly. When it's set up correctly, the way it works, because that's what most people need to understand, when a user tries to log into the repository, it will read their currently logged in Windows session. So your Windows user ID that you're logged into your laptop. If necessary, it will prompt you for your CAC or your PIV card. However, in most cases, it won't, because you had to provide it and authenticate against your smart card when you logged into your Windows session. On your Windows Active Directory user, there are the Active Directory groups that are assigned to you as a user, the groups that you're a membership of. That group membership is read from Active Directory by EA, and then those AD groups are matched against the security groups in the repository to determine what permissions you should have applied. And the same thing works in Collaborate. But basically, instead of Sparx authenticating the smart card, Windows is doing the authentication, and Sparx is taking your authentication from the Windows session and then authorizing you to use the platform based upon group assignments. Okay. Resources. I just covered a lot of things, and I assume we're probably going to have a few questions here in a little bit on here. But when it comes to government deployment, I started with those sort of 5 areas. You'll notice this diagram here has 6, but let me talk through this to help you understand what services are available to government agencies to help them in their deployment. Sparx Services North America is the primary support organization for assisting government agencies. We provide platform design services. We don't actually offer hosted cloud platforms for the government. We will help you if you decide to use a third-party provider. We can help you with assisted deployment if you want to self-manage this or you want to hire a vendor to do it. We can help you with the configuration and integration. So, configuring it for the type of modeling that you want to do. We can help you with user training. We can help you with support and maintenance. Like I mentioned before, we can't offer you the SaaS platforms because of the FedRAMP requirements, but we are fully staffed to support agencies who are trying to deploy Sparx either on-prem or in a government-managed cloud environment. The way to engage, you'll see on the screen, the email govsales@sparxsystems.us. That takes it directly to our government team who understands all these issues and can help you work through any issues that you have. We can help you with license sales and renewals. So even if you bought through a different channel before or have commercial licenses, we can help you get moved over to the government compliant EULA. We can help you with procurement assistance, and that may be RFPs, tool assessments. This may be hey, I need to buy this under under a GSA contractor, I need to go through this type of a channel in order to do it. We're very familiar with the different routes for procuring Sparx software, and we can help you navigate that and understand what your options are. For those resellers, the soup and the chess folks, there's a whole bunch of other acronyms that I can't remember right now, but you guys know who you are. If you get a request for Sparx licenses, you can reach out to us. We will help you navigate both the quoting process as well as the provisioning process, so you can transact those orders. And then if you're an agency that needs help with either implementation or training services, we can also assist with those things as well. That's the role of Sparx Services North America in supporting this. Our goal here is to make sure that if you're a government agency, you want to use Sparx, that we don't want you to fail. We want you to succeed, and whether it's helping your teams do the deployment and manage the platform or helping do it for you, we just want to make sure that you're successful. So think about what your internal capabilities are and identify the things you either don't have the capacity, you don't have the knowledge and experience, or it's simply not where you want to be focusing your team's time. And we've got the services set up to help you with that. So those are the services available for government agencies deploying Sparx. Okay. With that, we're to the end. We're to the sort of Q&A session. I'm going to unshare here, and we're going to open it up to question and answers. So, first question: did you indicate that Collaborate now supports Windows authentication using existing session authentication rather than user ID password? Yes. So Collaborate does support Windows authentication. It's part of the AD integration. This is an area that we're continuing to work with the Collaborate team to make it a little bit more seamless. In some deployments, and particularly some older versions of Collaborate, we've seen this not be the easiest process to either set up or for end users. But yes, it does support reading from your Windows session. And if it's not logging you in automatically, what it ends up doing is prompting you for Windows, your Windows credentials. But great question. If you have a deployment that is not working correctly, reach out to us, and we will work with the Collaborate team to address that issue. Okay, the next question is, I purchased Sparx licenses through a commercial channel before. How or can I convert it over to the government EULA? Yes, just simply send a note to GovSales at sparxsystems.us. We will get that converted over, and we will handle the paperwork to make sure that that's taken care of. We don't want anybody getting in trouble with GSA on this stuff. We want to make sure that if users want to use this software, that they can. So if you're in a situation where, for whatever reasons in the past, you ended up with commercial EULAs or the commercial EULA on commercial licenses, we can help you address that. The next question: does EA have an accessibility 508 compliance checker built into scan diagrams? No, it does not. And this is actually something that came up on a previous session yesterday in some of the discussions with the presenters, as we had a session talking about model validation. Whether it's 508 compliance or other modeling standards, there's a lot of subjectivity when it comes to how people draw their diagrams within EA, and we can certainly work on providing a set of rules and guidelines to do that sort of validation, but you're going to need an additional component in your deployment, something like the inquiry model validator, to run that compliance check for you. EA doesn't inherently run the accessibility checks. It would require a model validation add-in and definition of the rule sets. Okay, let me check Slack, see if there's any others. Okay, it looks like we made it to the end of the list of questions. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for attending this year's EA Global Summit. This is actually the last session of our event. And we've really enjoyed all the presenters who have contributed their time, and then the audience for your questions. Replays of the session will be posted on the EA Global Summit website, as well as the Collaborate YouTube channel following the conclusion of the event. And if you have any questions or would like to connect with any of the presenters, feel free to reach out to the team, sales at sparxsystems.us. We'll connect you regardless of who the presenters are, and we'll help match you up and get your questions answered. But I appreciate everyone's time in attending the summit, and we look forward to a great year, and we'll see you back next year. Have a great day.